Hey yo, salute to all my subscribers. Special shout out to everybody else passing through. YouTube, what's good? So, I came through to talk a little bit about the upcoming 2018 midterm elections. Now, this is going to be the most important blog video on this channel to date. So a few days ago, I watched two speeches on YouTube. I watched the former President Barack Obama give a speech at the State College in Chicago. I think it was the University of Illinois. And he was pretty much talking about the whole democracy and exercising your right to vote. And, just being involved and participating in the whole process. And basically, what some of the advantages that come when you do that and some of the problems that we potentially deal with if we choose to abscond from that whole process. And then I watched another speech, maybe a day or two after that one, of former First Lady Michelle Obama. She did a speech I also watched on YouTube and basically talking about the same thing. And we see this every time, election time comes around, whether it be midterm elections, national elections. We see these big key players come out and really push for people to go register to vote, for people to go, get out to actually vote. And that leads me to what I wanted to talk to y'all about in this video. Now, I'm speaking specifically to the demographic of people who, during the 2016 presidential elections, made a decision, and there was a lot of people, collectively it was a lot of people, who made a decision to not vote at all. Whether they were registered or weren't, they decided that their vote does not count, and those people decided that even if they did vote, they didn't feel like there would be any major changes that would affect their lives. And so they just decided to stay home on election day. They decided not to cast any absentee ballots. They just totally disregarded the whole process. And I'll be real, like, when that whole process was going on, I got to admit, I understood where a lot of those people were coming from. A lot of times, it's easy to feel like, especially if you come from certain inner cities or urban environments, you look a certain way, you have to deal with certain struggles that you feel like the government doesn't really address on a large scale. It's understandable that people get frustrated, and it's understandable that people feel like, my vote don't count anyway. And then there are people out there who feel like, even if they did vote, that nothing's really going to happen that's going to affect their lives directly. And, again, I heard you, 100%. I get the thought process. It's a frustrating thing. And then, fast forward from all that going on to the actual 2016 election day, when we pretty much watched a person who did not win the popular vote become president because they received the required number of electoral votes in the Electoral College. And then, as I was watching that happen, going into the morning after election night, as they were tallying up all the votes, and you sit there and you watch that screen and you see the count of the electoral votes go up, and you see, you're watching to see when that candidate, that person, is going to hit that number. The 270 electoral votes that are needed to actually become the next president. And then when I saw that happen, and when we all found out that the person who won the presidency didn't actually win the popular vote, I felt like at the time that a lot of the people who decided not to participate in the voting process, I felt like they were kind of justified. Because in my opinion, when you have more of the people overall voting for a candidate, but the other candidate wins, it kind of does reinforce a little bit the fact that maybe it's not about the individual vote. Maybe it doesn't count. Maybe those people were right. And then immediately after that, in the coming days, as the presidency got underway, and things just started to fall apart. And of course, people on the right won't tell you that. They'll say that things are doing very well since our 45th president has taken office. What I know is what most logical people know is that most of those things are just the benefit of the work that our 44th president, the last president, put into place. You know, and it's just riding that wave. But that's not what this blog is for, so I won't even get into that because I don't have time for the comments and the trolls. But what I started to realize very shortly after feeling like the people who chose not to participate in the voting process, what I started to feel like immediately after that subsided, after that feeling subsided, was that for all the people whose opinion was that there was no candidate that they truly believed in enough when it came to election day, that of all the choices, they really did not see a choice of any of the candidates who they would want to see in the Oval Office. Again, heard you. Understandable. Makes perfect sense. And so those people decided that even though they didn't want the president that we have in office now, that they just didn't want to participate in the process. And what I started to realize is that by not voting for someone, you're taking even more of a chance that the person you really don't want in office will actually win. And that's what actually happened. And when I look out on all the social media platforms, and I look out, you know, on all the posts, the newsfeed, the timelines, even on YouTube, you know, with all the blogs and videos that people do, complaining about what's going on, complaining about the current state of affairs and the political climate that we currently live in, present day. And I hear some of the same people complaining who decided not to participate in the democratic policy, the democratic process to go out and vote. I get a little angry because I feel like if you choose not to be in the game, if you choose not to participate in any way, shape, or form, and you choose to sit in the bleachers, shut the fuck up about the way the game is going. Now, I really mean this shit too. This is for every single millennial, every single person who is in the generation right behind mine and the generation right ahead of mine, and my generation as well. You can't complain about the problem if you don't want to be a part of the solution. Now, I understand fully that there's no real say, that when we go out to vote on election day, you know, whether it's national elections, whether it's midterm elections, whether it's local elections in your own cities and states, that the only choices you really have are the choices that are out there for you. You can only choose from the candidates who are running for whatever position it is. The only way to subvert that is to run for something yourself. You know, be the change that you want to see in the world. If you think that, you know, there's a better candidate out there, but that's not one of the options, then you can always run yourself. I mean, there are very little hurdles in the way of requirements, you know. Being a citizen, being born in this country, not having a criminal record, and you can pretty much run for any office that you so choose if it's a public office. You know, that's part of what is afforded to us as United States citizens in this democracy. So you can either be a part of the process that way, or as a citizen, you can exercise your ability to vote and be a part of the process that way. And what I've learned is this: we're never going to get 100% of what we want, and you're never going to have the perfect choice, whatever your perfect choice is, unless it's you yourself who's running to make those changes. But like our former president, Barack Obama, mentioned in the speech that he gave last week, the point is not to get perfect. The point is to get better each time. You know, progress is always going to be better than regression. And regression, in my opinion, is not even as bad as being stagnant, because if you're not doing anything, you're not moving forward or backwards, to me that's worse. You know, there needs to be some kind of motion. And whether you're contributing to the progression of this country, the progression of the democratic system, the progression of us as Americans, the progression of us as human beings, however you see it, if you're not contributing to that process, then you are indirectly contributing to regression. You are. And each time people who are afforded the ability, the right to go out and vote and be a part of that process, each time you avoid that right, in my opinion, responsibility, not only are you negating the people who fought and bled and died for that right, because they understood the power that was behind it. They understood that why would a system for so long prevent black and brown men and women in general from participating in the voting process if there was no reason, there was no power behind it? The system understands. This government understands. This country's history. The people who ran the country back then understood the extreme power that goes in having a say, having a vote that you can cast. And for me, it's not about party lines. I have no loyalty to party lines. I am a registered independent. For me, it's simply about right versus wrong. And that's all that ever matters with me, with anything in life. I don't care if it's politics. I don't care if it's religion. I don't care if it's how you choose to live your life versus how I choose to live mine. I don't care what race you are. I don't care what culture you represent. I don't care what nationality you identify as. I don't care where you come from or what you look like. For me, it's right versus wrong. And just like I feel everyone, who has the right to vote has a right to exercise that right and should not have any unnecessary hurdles presented against them, with things like, these certain states trying to block voter registration because of certain IDs and other roadblocks that, come up. But I also feel like, as a part of that same democratic system, that same democracy that we all celebrate, that people have fought, bled, and died for, if you choose not to vote, that's your right as well. But I really want the demographic of people who chose not to during the national elections. If you are any way, shape, or form remorseful or regretful over the fact that you did not choose to vote because the person who became president is not who you feel should have become president, and if you are not happy with the job that current president is doing, then this upcoming 2018 midterm election is the most important election, because this midterm election, for people who only focus on national elections and presidential elections, understand that the president, for the most part in this country, is, even though billed as being the leader of the free world, really just barely more than the face of the country, a CEO, if you will. The midterm elections is what determines those board members, those shareholders, the people who have the real power in the country. Because during the midterm elections, essentially you're voting for Congress. You're voting for those members of the House, the Senate, who will either back or, try to stifle whatever agenda the president may have for their administration. And when you have a Republican president, the best way to have the most efficient checks and balances is to have a majority, in my opinion, majority Democratic Congress. And vice versa, when you have a Democratic president, the best way to have the most balance is to have majority Republican Congress. And of course, a lot of times that presents, in my opinion, a lot of the stalemates that we have seen in recent presidential administrations. And of course, Republicans, if they have a Republican president, they want a majority Republican Congress. And if, Democrats have a Democratic president, then they want the same in respect to their party. And we have had that, and that's fine. As long as there are checks and balances and you have something in that system working to try and offset and balance those things. It's very important for these midterm elections, though, that we take back some of the control, some of the majority control that Republicans have in Congress right now, because it's going to 100% directly decide whether or not we are going to be stuck with our current president for another 2 years or potentially another 4 years. Potentially another 6 years. Because if things continue the way that they are, And if people take the same approach to the midterm elections as they took to the 2016 presidential election, then in my opinion, Donald Trump will be elected again in 2020, and more than likely we'll have to deal with him for another 4 years. Now, what the demographic of people who I'm speaking to, those of you who chose not to vote during the 2016 presidential elections, what I need for you to figure out and ask yourselves is, are you okay with the job that the current president is doing? Enough that you want to see him remain in office for not just another 2 years, because barring impeachment proceedings and him being convicted of whatever he would potentially be impeached for, we have to deal with him for the next 2 years. That's pretty much a given unless he is impeached, and then not just impeached because that's just the proceedings, but then convicted of some wrongdoing and removed from office or resigns. Unless one of those things happen, which pretty far-fetched, only a couple presidents in history that have been impeached, and one ended up not being convicted and remained in office, and the other one resigned. And I don't mean to get into a civics lesson or anything like that, but do you want to deal with this president for the next 2 years or the next 6 years? And if it's the next 6 years that we end up having to deal with this president because too many people decide again not to go out and vote, how much worse can things get? Because things are bad right now, but they can always get worse, and they can always get better. So this is the only time on this channel, and you can go back and look at any of my other videos, blogs, podcasts, whatever. It's very rare that I ask people to share my videos. I mean, if you subscribe, you subscribe. If you comment, you comment. This platform exists so that there can be open and honest discussion, and I only bring real shit to this platform. Irregardless of if you agree or disagree on my content, it's real content. It's real shit that we deal with as people every day, day in, day out. Be it our personal relationships, be it our, our professional careers, be it, our family situations, whatever. This, like I said, is the most important video blog on this channel to date, and needs to be shared, and needs to be put on everybody's social media, because I really foresee some pretty fucked up shit happening in this country if people take the stance of, my vote doesn't count, so I'm not going to go out and vote. And then we end up with this president for another 4 years on top of the next 2 that we already have to deal with him. And at least for the people who think, well, he's already president, what can we do now anyway? Well, that's why midterm elections are important. Because if during these midterm elections, enough people who do oppose the current regime goes out and votes, the majority control of the House, the Senate, the people who really make the decisions as to whether or not a president's agenda is going to be furthered or not, not furthered. These are the elections, the midterm elections, that decide that, because who we put in those positions, will be the ones who will either have your best interest at heart or not. And no one's ever going to fully represent you 100%. Only you can do that, but the object is to choose the lesser of the evils. And if you don't like the way things are going now, then there should be nothing that should tell you that if you don't vote, that it's gonna change. Things don't change just because you want them to. You have to actually put effort forth into changing those things. It's the law of physics. You know what I mean? It's just like an object in motion will stay in motion. If you don't like the direction this country's going in, it's not going to change unless you participate in that process and do something to help change it. And one individual vote may not count. But the problem is when you have too many individuals thinking that way, and too many individuals removing themselves from that process, it's that collective that starts to become dangerous, and those numbers add up very quickly. So my call to action, literal call to action, would be, if you're not registered to vote now, to go out and register, because the deadline is coming. And if you are registered to vote, vote. Go out and do some research on these senators. Do some research on, these people that are going to be put into these positions, and vote. And even if you can't find a candidate, you know, which is what people struggled with between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, if you can't find a candidate who you 100% believe in, the object is to pick the lesser of the two evils. Because I 100% believe that if more people had gone out to vote, then the person who is now president would not be. And I don't believe that a vast majority of the issues that we are seeing 2 years into this presidency would not be happening if Hillary Clinton would have won the presidency. Because although I don't agree with all of her views, and although that, you know, there are some things with her that are questionable, it's about the lesser of the two evils. You know, no one's ever going to get what they 100% of what they want. The object is to prevent things from getting worse, even if you can't make them better. So that's my call to action. You know, we really need to get off our ass and really participate in the process. You know what I'm saying? Like, you tried it your way in 2016. Clearly, it did not work, right? And as far as choice goes, you know, because so many people who I talked to who said, yo, not for nothing, but I don't like any of these candidates, so there's really no point. Well, the problem is there's no such thing as free choice. We get the perception of free choice because, you know, you can go into any store and you know, if it's a clothing store, you can choose what garments you want to wear based on what your style, you know, or fashion savviness is. But those options were still pre-selected for you to choose from. That's anything in life. You know, if it's not the store and you choose to go into a different store, well, the stores that you have to choose from, whether it be JCPenney's or Macy's or, you know, what have you, those stores have been pre-selected for you. The merchandise in those stores have been pre-selected by the manufacturers who made those stores, and then the store owners and the merchants who chose to carry that inventory. There's never going to be free choice because there's nothing new under the sun. But of the choices that are presented to you with anything in life, we know this because we choose the things that would best benefit us, that would have our best interest at heart. And politics is the same. It's a game. You know, it's about making sure, because you know that you're never going to get 100% of what you want, because you can never be 100% fully represented, because it's such a melting pot and there's so many different cultures and needs and belief systems and there's so many different ideals. The object to win this game in politics as a voter, as a citizen, is to make sure that each side, each belief system, each ideal is as fair and even as possible. Because no one side should get everything of what they're asking for. And checks and balances exist and democracy exists so that one side doesn't get everything they want. Then that would be a monarchy. That would be a dictatorship. Democracy is about give and take. It's about compromise, which is required for any relationship to work. And what is a relationship if nothing else? How does the relationship between citizen and government, how does that not apply? The same principles apply. The same principles apply to the relationship that government has with its people and vice versa. It's no different than anything else. And we have to deal with the government. We have to deal with laws. We have to deal with the three branches of the government that have been structured until this thing all falls apart. So since we have to deal with it anyway, the best way to deal with it is to learn how to work within the system. Either you put yourself in and be that change that you want to see from the inside out, or you at least come to the game and participate and not just sit on the bleachers. And that's what I would say. So like, comment, and subscribe. Share this video, because after November, I don't want to see any person, and I promise I will drag anybody I see who complains and talks shit about anything that Trump is doing or anything that any of his cabinet members are doing, and you didn't vote. Don't talk shit unless you're willing to do shit. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know. Let me know what y'all think about this one, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace and love.